Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamey Daddy channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So today I wanted to discuss something that basically came up on one of my other videos when I was talking about some mechanics with Outriders and the division and how both development teams and game designs were able to approach the health and healing system. Now, those of you who've played Outriders, you know that Outriders is a health on kill system. Some people have said they like this. I've seen comments of some people who say they do not like this. But I think another comment was really strange. And this came from a Division player because they basically mentioned that, in the Division, when players are playing, missions, especially Legendary, they're always cowering behind cover and they don't ever feel strong. Now, that was a very interesting comment because I was like, well, if you've played this game long enough, you know that you can actually tank and in some cases face tank legendary enemy NPCs if you build very well. Now, in legendary NPC missions, this is basically the stronghold. It is a little set, it's set up a little differently. The enemies do things and they have kind of a better advantage over you because of the space, flanking and all. But in the summit where there's little room, you can funnel them, you can face tank and melt them, and you can play the game differently. So I went ahead and basically put a build video from, I think, one of the YouTubers here in the community that was making PvE builds, looking at, kind of a face tank, protection from elite build. One of the ones that Mark of Blades pretty much introduced here in the community in a sense. I think he was the one who made it very popular. I even made a video saying this is insane and, pointing towards everybody checking it out. But then again, is it really the case that, Outriders really does make you feel strong and the Division doesn't? I think that categorization is not a fair assessment. You see, many times in the gaming sphere, when we talk about gaming, a lot of people usually discuss these issues from a very shallow level. If you play a game like Outriders, you're going to pretty much feel this power fantasy. The game is designed as a full-fledged game. The power creep is accomplished when you finish the game and finish whatever the end game content is. In the Division, on the other hand, that power creep is the journey for you to be able to get to where your player is stronger. Hence, you don't necessarily feel powerful until you've played the game long enough and you start enjoying the systems or learning how the systems work and learning how to leverage them to your advantage and to your team's advantage. In fact, if you're looking at the footage here on the screen, you can see how fast we cleared this encounter. For those of you who play legendary missions, a lot, you know that this place can be very chaotic, but because of the team that we were in, this was actually a random match-made team, by the way. We knew exactly what to do. We came in here. Yes, we used cover because it is a mechanic that the Division is based on. And I think this is where that response comes in. The Division 2 doesn't have that philosophy as Outriders, where Outriders wants you to come out of cover. The Division wants you to stay in cover. And to the person who made this comment, I also wanted to share something quite interesting. And that is one of the tweets from one of the sister development studios that works on or has worked on the Division franchise. And that is Terry Spire from Red Storm. For those of you who can remember very clearly, if you can't remember, I will link the tweet for you guys. This was a tweet that Terry tweeted at the E3 conference in 2018 when players were testing out this game. They brought a cut down demo of the Division 2 to E3, and he mentioned something on his Twitter and said, watching players play this game, every single one in cover. That was a big emphasis that the Division 1 closed on because it got to a point where you didn't necessarily need cover in a cover-based Division 1 shooter in order for you to thrive. And so the developers took that and said, we need to go ahead and find a way that will have players depend on cover. And for the most part, it's interesting that some people have said, you could do all kinds of other things when in reality, in a shooter game, it's you damage them damage you. Hence, if you want to make people use cover, make them damage you more, I think is the formula to use, but we can argue that nuance later. Now, again, another thing is the AI in the hardest difficulty levels. Not even necessarily only the hardest difficulty levels in the Division versus, say, Outriders behave differently. I'm not saying one is better than one. I mean, if you actually were to ask me, I would tell you that the Division 2's AI is miles better than that of Outriders. Everybody in the gaming community that's played both of them We all know this. And it's not because we want to, I'm a Division fan, I'm a Division YouTuber. Yes, I want to brag on it once in a while, but from a technical perspective and from some of the things that I've seen, I now understand better why the AI in the Divisions franchise, this is Division 1 and 2, is actually pretty smart, especially 2. So in a game developer conference in I think 2017 or so, after the Division 1 had been released, AI developer Drew Reschner, who's a massive studios developer, and another developer, I can't remember his name, but we all know Drew because he comes on the state of the game and explains a lot of changes on the game. So we know who he is if we watch state of the game more closely. And he and this other developer took about 35 minutes to explain different aspects of the way they went about developing the AI in the Division 1. And the Division 1 AI system is actually based on a lot of conditions and events. Now, this is the simplest way that I can break it down in this video so as not to confuse a lot of people. So what I mean by this is they've created a series or numerous types of scenarios based on the way the game mechanics work, and they build the AI to respond to these unique scenarios in order for the AI to continue to provide a challenge for the player. And the example that they showed in that GDC conference, which I'll link for you guys in the description below, is how the AI of the elite nature will interact with a seeker mine. So what they do is they take all the different enemy types, the different enemy archetypes, and they begin to test out these different scenarios. Say a seeker mine is going to a regular NPC. I'm talking red bar, just a grunt. Usually the seeker mine will hit them, or depending on the faction they are. In fact, they broke down the different factions as well. If you guys remember the rioters were the really weird, awkward faction, and if you threw a seeker mine at them, they'll run disorientedly, it'll fall down, and the seeker mine will hit them. But say you threw the seeker mine at, say, the Rikers or the Cleaners, you're going to notice that their behavior is also different, and they will more than likely dodge that seeker mine. In fact, within that faction or the other factions, you'll notice that the elite enemy NPCs will shoot the seeker mine rather than dodge the seeker mine. These were behaviors that they set up for every single skill, every single potential scenario that they could come up with in order to make the AI respond. So you're dealing with an AI that already has regular AI mechanics, tuned within it, and then more. I mean, it's insane how much detail went into the AI design for the game. And not only did these two gentlemen that spoke in this conference, take credit, they didn't take credit for designing all of the AI. In fact, one of the really cool things that they did was they talked about how the designers in the studio at that time, pretty much helped to improve the AI in the game because they just basically moved all of them together. Both the AI programmers and some of the game designers, they started to kind of sit closer together in the office, and so it was easy for them to be able to iterate a lot of functionality, a lot of improvements, and hence the Division's AI pretty much came out to be, in my opinion, one of the best AIs that you can have in a looter shooter. So when people talk about why agents in Division don't necessarily feel strong, you can't necessarily only evaluate it from the perspective of, say, we as the agents don't feel strong. You have to look at the other side, which is what enemy types are we fighting and at what point? And then the fact that somebody even pointed to a legendary mission, even for the most part, has to tell you that, okay, this is very different. I mean, if you look from this clip, I can use my chem launcher to basically fry every enemy NPC, but enemy NPCs are, pretty much already trained to respond to these kinds of, incidences and do well. Usually they'll move to cover so that you can't burst them down while they're under that status effect, or they'll run around disoriented so that your aim is, pretty much off. And in many cases in this particular place, because they're standing in the open, they have a lot more grenadiers in the way that it's set up. So we are dealing with encounters that have been almost prefabricated. And even as much as we try our best to kind of knock out, what happens here, I think a lot of the work that has gone into developing and, fine-tuning the AI to respond to these different scenarios make the Division quite unique, make it challenging, and can make you feel like you're on the back foot. If you notice here, I get toasted by grenadiers because I basically melted like almost everybody here with just my chem launcher and my stinger in this particular scenario. So we could go scenario by scenario. We could look at the way the Division is set up. And I think the moment you start looking at it much deeper, you start to get an appreciation exactly for how this game has actually come to where it is. It's easy to listen to a lot of the negativity and a lot of the critiques, but a lot of those, in many cases, I've noticed, do not take into account a lot of what makes these kinds of games unique. And even for Outriders in itself, it makes a lot of sense that Outriders is using a much more simpler version of the AI, because from working with just the Unreal Engine, I can tell you the AI is a very challenging aspect. I finished my health system like weeks ago, and I've been stuck on an AI that just runs to me and hits me. Literally, I can't even get that to work just yet. I can't even imagine how in Outriders they were able to get all those AIs to work the way that they have. Yes, to me, they're not necessarily as fine-tuned or polished as other AI I've seen, even within the Unreal Engine space, but I do get the difficulty and the challenge, having put my hand to the work to try to build one for myself. It's a mess and it's very challenging. And to try to do it for a shooter, especially the kind that you want to encourage players to come out of cover, you're going to have to do a lot of different things to be able to make that core gameplay work the way you want it to. And so in Outriders, you're not in cover. So hence, the enemies are going to be rushing you. But if the enemies rush you, then you have to, by default, be super powerful to be able to repel them. If not, you have no refuge and you'll die over and over and you'll be frustrated. And then you're not going to have an enjoyable game. So it makes sense that they make you pretty much, Iron Man in Outriders so that you can feel powerful, because if you don't feel powerful while you're, pretty much vulnerable and out of cover, think about it. In The Division, nonetheless, we're powerful, but the enemies are also really powerful as well to be able to counter in different aspects and different scenarios. And whatever we throw at them, they try to adapt, and, basically they can converge and destroy you at any whim. It's like they have some weird programming where they just pretty much go in for the kill. That's what, you almost will not survive unless you have some unique card to pull in those scenarios. So I hope I've been able to kind of put some light on all of this. It's easy to be jumping, back and forth on these topics. And I get it. Outriders is fresh in a lot of people's minds, but sometimes I'll see these comments and it's like, guys, a lot of these games are developed differently. A lot of these games are developed in a unique aspect. So there's no need to be saying one is better than one in these cases. I just feel like they're not taking into consideration the prowess of the teams. Massive Ubisoft already released Division 1 and they had enough time to work on the PvE aspect of the game, which is actually pretty solid. And so with Outriders coming in, 5 years in development, bringing this game to the market, it is different. It's a nice approach. And so it's their first game. I mean, I can tell you that Outriders 2 will most likely be better than this particular game. I mean, this experience from Outriders 1 hasn't been the cleanest, but at the end of the day, to me, I prefer that they have actually put the effort and put themselves out there than they sit in development for, another few more years and still bring out a game that is still like this anyways. So now they've gotten the feedback. They can take that to the drawing board and bring something that, gamers will find a wider appeal for. And some gamers already like the game anyways. I'll stop yapping. I'll get out of your hair. Thank you so much for your time and audience. Respond in the comment section. Let me hear what you think. Talk to you soon. Peace out.